I am joined by Chris Lengquist. Thanks, Chris, for taking time to talk with me today.
Well, thank you. Thank you for asking.
So, how this came about is Chris wrote an article that I read. I think it was back in February. And quite frankly, he talked about some things that I haven't seen, at least in this amount of detail, in my 27 years in the business. And so I reached out to Chris, and here we are. Chris has a deep resume when it comes to real estate. Chris, can you tell us a little bit about what you've done and what you're doing now?
I got licensed all the way back in 2002 and thought I would just sell real estate like what I imagined a real estate agent would do, and ended up really specializing in investment properties. It suits my personality. Like, I didn't want to show one more house to one more person who said I would buy it, except the kitchen's the wrong color. And I'd be like, well, just paint it. Like, I really like investment properties. It appeals to my math nature. It appeals to my non-emotional side. So I did rather well at that, and that led to property management because kind of one leads to the other, and then it kind of becomes this cycle. And so I own at Astra Realty in Kansas City as well. I own that as a separate property management entity that serves the greater Kansas City area. But I'm also the operating principal over at a Keller Williams franchise. And I have a small sales team there, and I lead this office. I'm also a Keller Williams MAPS coach. And so I guess I'm kind of all in on Keller Williams. I'm also a Keller Williams University instructor. What I love most about real estate, Greg, and you probably know this as well as I do, no 2 days are the same.
Right.
There's something to learn every day. And I just dig that. I just think it's fun.
The article you wrote was about equity sharing agreements. Let me see how you titled it. Home ownership with a little help from mom and dad. So tell me about what prompted you to write that article.
I was first exposed to this way back in, but long before I was a real estate agent, back in the 90s, actually, when there was a recession. Remember the savings and loan debacle and all that kind of fun stuff?
Yes.
So I was first exposed all the way back then, and I ended up buying my first house in suburban Washington, D.C. on a contract for deed. So I was always interested because I was self-employed and I didn't have 20% to put down back in the day. But I wrote this article recently because I don't ever hear anybody talking about equity sharing. And I think most older people, I mean, you've got a little gray in your hair. I don't even have hair anymore. I'm 59 years old. But when I sit around with my friends and the conversation turns to housing, everybody has a deep frustration with young people who are being priced out of the market, or they just don't have the same access with the higher interest rates. And so the average age of the first time home buyer is about 34. And I got to thinking, well, what about this equity sharing that I used to hear about? So with my 19-year-old daughter, I did an equity share. And essentially what I did was I put in all of the money for the down payment, for the closing costs, for the initial rehab, and she puts in all of the monthly payments. She has to work a job to make the monthly payments and all this other kind of fun stuff. And she has to take care of all the repairs on the house up into a price point that we set. And she lives there. She's got to take care of it. So it's better than a tenant because there's ownership. And we split it 50-50.
Mm.
So when we go to sell the house, the first thing that happens is I get all of my investment back. So I'm made whole on my investment. And then she gets made whole on the equity that she paid down. And then what we do is we split the equity growth from appreciation 50-50.
So, in a nutshell, you put up all the upfront money for the acquisition and renovation costs. She's responsible for the monthly payment. When you sell, you get your upfront money back. Your daughter gets the growth in equity related to the pay down of the loan. And then what's left from that, you split 50-50, right?
Right.
Yeah,
It's just, I mean, how safe of an investment is that? First of
right.
all, it's my daughter. So now she is building an unbelievable payment history, her credit history,
Right.
because she's on the deed. Like, I can't sell it without her. She can't sell it without me. And the last great thing is I've got a certain set of money that I've got to put somewhere. And Greg, it's more than likely that I could have maximized that money to get me a little bit of even a higher return down the road. But I'm getting a better than an inflationary rate of a return back, even after you cut it in half. And the biggest investment of all, my daughter is now in the homeownership game at 19 years old. I'm investing into my kids' future so that they'll be on the haves, not the have-nots when it comes to real estate.
Right. And as you just mentioned, the average age of the typical first time home buyer is in their mid 30s. So to become a first time home buyer at age 19 is a huge head start. The difference in wealth creation when you compare homeowners to non-homeowners is staggering. I believe it's something like 40 times greater for a homeowner versus a renter. First time home buyers just have to get in the game, which can be challenging right now due to affordability issues.
Absolutely. And by the way, I'm out of kids. Okay. So I can't do it with any more kids, but I've got a particular niece that I'm thinking about doing this with.
Yes, you mentioned in your article that it doesn't have to be a child or even a family member to do an equity sharing agreement.
I'm looking at also doing it with one of my employees.
Interesting.
Think about it. It locks in the employee. It adds to the fact that they already have a 401k with me. I'm building that security for them, but they're also creating their own private wealth.
About 30% of first time home buyers receive gift funds, typically from a family member. What's unique about the equity sharing agreement is that it's a true investment and not a gift. It's a business transaction that spells out in writing who's responsible for what, and then exactly how the proceeds will be divided once the property's sold. One of the sections of your article was the 7 steps of an equity sharing agreement. Do you have those in front of you?
I do actually. I've got them here. And hey, listen, there might be an eighth for somebody or a ninth for somebody. That's okay. These are just the seven I identified.
Let's take a look at those 7 agreements.
Well, the first one is to get your financing in order and to qualify with the adult child as the primary buyer and the parent as the main financial qualifier. You get a primary owner occupant financing rather than a real estate investor financing. So right away, I'm on the winning side of that game. I mean, you're the lender. Anything inaccurate about that?
Correct. Financing terms for purchasing a primary residence are superior to the terms for financing an investment property. Both the down payment requirements and the interest rate is higher on an investment property than it is for a primary residence.
You'll probably get into the leverage differences and the return differences depending on how much you put down.
Right.
The
Yes.
second thing you need to do is create a binding agreement between you and your child. Here was my attitude on that. There might be some parents out there with a story in their head about, I don't need that with my kid. Well, we're about to sign a 2-inch thick stack of papers for the mortgage on this. And the mortgage person's pretty insistent on us having signed paper. So part of the educational experience for my daughter going through this was to know that paper matters, that agreements matter, that when you sign your name, you're giving your word. And I'm just a little old school. I believe that she needs to understand the weight of what we're agreeing to. Third is identify the house. And here's what's fun is we did it in Lawrence, Kansas, which is about a 25-minute drive from my house. And I know a lot of real estate agents out there are always insistent that they find their own stuff. That's why they got their real estate license. I actually hired a real estate agent from Lawrence, Kansas, who's very well connected to find me the home. Because in this market, Greg, have you heard a lot of people complaining there's not enough inventory, there's not enough inventory, there's not enough inventory?
I hear that every day.
Yeah. So I paid this agent a full buyer's agent commission, and she found me a home that wasn't even on the market that had a little bit of sweat equity to put into it. And it was a win-win for the sellers who wanted a quick sale, and it was a win-win for myself and my daughter. And so I was happy to pay the agent. So that was the next one. The fourth one is purchase the house under the both names and then go through the normal home buying process. Then you close and then let time, this is the big one, let time do its thing.
I've heard about too many issues with a family member loaning another family member money, and then the issues that arise from the lack of a written agreement.
So we've never made it a secret when we were raising our kids that it was Marie and I before you guys came, and it'll be Marie and I after you guys are gone. And so I'm also looking at this and talking about it through the process with each of our kids that we have to have our money for retirement. We're investing in you, but we're also investing in this house so that we'll have our retirement.
Yeah.
And so, by the way, you need to start thinking about your retirement, whether you're 19 or 31. There's a new book by Scott Galloway. Have you heard about this book, The Algebra of Investments or something like that? I can't remember what it is. But the entire premise of his book is let time do its thing.
Right.
And by the way, this article came out before he released the book, so I want full credit. No, I'm just kidding. But no, time is the major benefit for young people, and let's face it, when you and I were young, we didn't appreciate the power of time.
If you're not educated on the power of compound interest and the amount of difference that the time makes, just Google it. I believe it was Einstein who called compound interest the eighth wonder of the world. The difference at age 65 for somebody who starts investing at age 19 versus age 35 is absolutely huge. We've hit on some of the agreements that you have, such as you providing the funds for the acquisition and the renovation. So basically all of the upfront money, and then she's responsible for the monthly payment. What other agreements did you have?
Yeah, if she has roommates and if she has major repairs, like let's just say the chimney fell off one day, which we're not expecting to happen, but if it does, a young woman going to college and working 20 hours a week at a coffee shop is probably not going to have the funds to do that. So, if there were a major repair, like if I had to put in a new heating or air conditioning system or something along those lines, I'm going to take care of that. But again, it goes on the ledger, and when that house sells, I get my investment back first.
Got it. So any major repairs that you fund will basically be added to your acquisition costs, and you're made whole when the property sells, and she doesn't have to worry about any major unexpected expenses.
Yeah. And so we have those agreements. You can add agreements to there. If you go to realestatewriter.substack.com, you can find the article. I worked out some math that seemed to be pretty accurate for me as to how much the adult child's going to benefit from this. Because 5 or 6 years from now, when she leaves Lawrence to go do whatever she's going to do, or maybe even less time, she gets to take that equity growth from appreciation and she gets to go buy her own house now. Think about the amount of her credit will reflect solid house payments and
Right.
all this other kind of fun stuff. And she'll be able to go buy her house without mom and dad, which would be great. Then I'll be able to reinvest that property elsewhere.
You showed the math in your main article. Again, it's not guaranteed that it'll work out exactly the way you projected. I personally think you were a little bit conservative. If you would, walk us through the math and show us how it works.
So we bought a $205,000 house. And the best part is I can park my car there for my KU basketball games. It's about a 7-minute walk to Allen Fieldhouse. It's that close to campus. And then we put about $18,000 in rehab and updates to the house. So I'm all in about 228, and the after repair value right there was 240. So right away we've got $12,000 worth of equity. She gets 6, I get 6. And then in 2023, the average appreciation in that market was about 2.2%. So I said, okay, well, we'll add that on there, expecting 4% average appreciation as a straight line would suggest. Like this year, we're up around 5% in that market again. The straight line appreciation in Kansas is right around 4%. Like you have years that it's 12 and you have years that it's -1 or whatever, but over any 20-year period, it's about 4%. So I use that number. So at the end of 5 years, that would put the value somewhere around 286.9 or so. Definitely not guaranteed. You can never be sure about that. But then I just go through the rest of the boring math, creating all that is. But the equity gain from appreciation would be an equal $29,450 for each of us at the end of 5 years.
So you get your 64,000 back plus an extra 30,000. She gets $30,000 basically for making the monthly payments over that 5-year period.
$11,000 principal reduction.
Oh, right. I forgot about that. So every month that she makes a payment, a portion of that payment reduces the loan balance. It's like a forced savings account for her. So she ends up with 30,000 from the appreciation plus another 11,000 from the principal reduction of the loan. So she's got $41,000 that she can roll into the next property, hypothetically at the age of 24.
I hope she gets a great job somewhere and she goes and buys another house somewhere else, because I want to buy that house. I'm planning on keeping that house. I plan on long after I'm gone, that house is to helping to fund my wife's retirement.
Yeah, I think I saw that in your article that you have first right of refusal when she wants to sell.
At current market value, no discounts, current market value.
So you buy out her equity position and then keep the property as an investment property or a rental. Brilliant. I was able to recreate your numbers with some software that I have. I may tack that on to this video as an addendum at the end, but your average annual rate of return worked out to somewhere around 7.5%, right?
Yeah.
What some people don't understand is the leverage piece. You don't have to put as much money down as you chose to do. You can do less because it's considered a primary residence. 5%, maybe 3% in certain circumstances. I'm just pointing that out because I don't want people to get scared off thinking that they have to have 60, 70, $80,000 to make something like this work. Your scenario amounted to approximately 20% down payment when you factor in the 20% down payment you did plus the renovation costs and then the after repaired value of the property. I also did 20%, 15%, and 10%, and then I ran out of columns. Again, what some people don't understand is if you have a $240,000 house, which is what you had after the renovations, and it goes up by 4% in value, it doesn't matter whether you owe zero on that property or if you have a 95% loan. In all four examples, the house appreciated by the same amount, $60,000. 25% down, house went up by 60,000. 20% down, house went up by 60,000. 15, 10, 60,000, 60,000. What changed was the return on the investment. The smaller amount you invested up front, the bigger or the higher the annual rate of return. You mentioned to me during our first conversation that you did it the way you did it because you have some personal beliefs.
Did it be based on personal philosophy and ability? I have a philosophy about where I want my equity in every home, and God has blessed me with the ability to do that. Now, so Greg, if I can just like sum this up just real quick. I grew up in a house, my mom and my dad loved me. But the conversations around the dinner table were not how to create wealth. The conversations around the dinner table was, hey, the Sunday paper came out today, and so we're all going to sit around and clip coupons of our favorite thing. You know, there's nothing you can't own without financing it, was how I was kind of raised. And so when I got to college at the University of Kansas, I bought a car and I bought it on time because it's a nice car and I want a nice car and I'm going to have payments on it. Well, these are not the kind of financial conversations that build wealth. Right. And so like so many college students, I got a credit card, I got a car, and then I graduate and I've got all this debt. That's just not the way to get started. I'm a college dropout. I'm still like, I think it's 16 credit hours short of having my degree. I'll die 16 credit hours short of having my degree. But I always like to say to people, I've built a couple of successful businesses because of what I've learned along the way and what real estate has taught me about business. And people will always say, well, you know, Bill Gates, he was a college dropout. And I was like, well, time out. Bill Gates dropped out of Harvard Business School. His parents were really smart and already wealthy. Their dinner conversations were different than we're going to clip coupons after dinner. And if you did this with one of your kids, what we're really doing is starting to teach a different way of thinking about assets and money and appreciable assets versus depreciable assets in a real practical way that's going to set them up for the rest of their life. Like, I don't have this dream of leaving my kids gigantic amounts of money for inheritance. I have this dream of teaching them how to create their own so I can leave all of mine to my favorite churches and charities. That's my hope to do this kind of stuff. And so I wrote the article with the hope of, hey, if you're a little frustrated that your kids don't have the same advantage, but you have some assets sitting on the sidelines, go do that. It's a thing you can do.
You also mentioned when we first talked about the older generations, I think you said they have a responsibility to help if they're able.
I just think to whom much is given, much is expected. At some point, don't we have to stop taking and start giving and start educating? There's also a book out, I think it came out like 2 years ago. It's called Die with Zero. And I wish I could remember the author's name right now. And he makes some compelling arguments in there. Like, you want to die penniless, like spend it all the way down to zero because you can't take it with you. Right? Part of his argument is waiting till you're retired to do your traveling because your health is going to start impacting whether you can travel or not. But a huge part of his argument is quit waiting till you die to give your kids the money because by that time they're probably in their 50s, maybe even their 60s. They've already worked out their financial situation. In your 20s and especially your 30s when you're still trying to raise kids and work the job. Do you remember your 30s, Greg? I mean, it's just like that's when your kids need your help.
I've heard of that book, but I've never read it. I'll put that one on my list. What we've talked about today is an example of how to do that.
It's pretty cool. I just think that we have a social responsibility and it starts at home, but then we can look elsewhere as well.
Anything else you'd like to chat about before we wrap it up?
Well, I love talking about basketball and soccer, but I don't think that's what this podcast is all about.
I'm going to go read some more of your articles, and if you are open to it, would love to have you back again. I think you have a depth of knowledge and experience that would be valuable to anybody that might happen to come across this. See you next time.